Welcome to Leader IS in association with Yashas Institute, Navi Mumbai. Myself, Professor Suhas Sargar. Today, in this chapter, we are going to learn CBSE Board Standard 7th Subject History Our Past 2nd Chapter number 1 Tracing Changes Through 1,000 Years. Take a look at the map 1 and 2 and was made in 1154 CE by the Arab geographer Al-Idris. The section reproduced here is a detail of the Indian subcontinent from his larger map of the world. The map too was made in the 1720 by a French cartographer. The two maps are quite different even though they are of the same area. In Al-Idris's map, South India is where we would expect to find the North India, and the Sri Lanka is the island at the top. The place names are marked in Arabic. And there are some well-known names like Kannauj in Uttar Pradesh, spelled in the map of Kannauj. Map 2 was made early, nearly 600 years after Map 1, during which the time information about the subcontinent had changed considerably. This map seems more familiar to us, and the coastal areas in particular are surprisingly detailed. This map was used by the European sailors and the merchants on their voyages. Look at the areas in the interior of the subcontinent on the map too. They are detailed as those on the coast? Follow the course of the river Ganga and see how it is shown. Why do you think there is a difference in the level of detail and the accuracy between the coastal and inland areas in this map? Box close. Leader IS in association with Yashas Institute, Navi Mumbai, Professor Suhas Sargar. Equally important is the fact that the science of cartography differed in the two periods when historians read documents. Maps and texts from the past, they have to be sensitive to the different historical backgrounds, the context in which information about the past was produced, new and old terminologies. If the context in which information is produced changes with the time, what about the language and meanings? Historical record exists in a variety of languages which have changed considerably over the years. Medieval Persian, for example, is different from modern Persians. The difference is not just with the regard to the grammar and vocabulary. The meaning of word also changed over time. Take the term Hindustan, for example. Today, we understand it as India, the modern nation state. When the term was used in the 13th century by the Minaz-e-Siraz, a chronicler who wrote in Persia, he meant the areas of Punjab, Haryana, and land between the Ganga and Yamuna, used the term in a political sense for the lands that were a part of the dominions of the Delhi Sultanate. The areas included in this term shifted with the extent of the Sultanate, but the term never included the South India. By contrast, in the early 16th century, the Babur used the Hindustan to describe the geography, the fauna and the culture of the inhabitants of the subcontinent. As we will say later in this chapter, this was somewhat similar to the way the 14th century poet Amir Khusro used the word Hind. While the idea of geographical and the cultural entity like India did exist, the term Hindustan did not carry the political and national meaning which we associate with it today. Historians today have to be careful about the terms they use because they mean different things in the past. Take for example a simple term like foreigners. It is used today to mean someone who is not an Indian. In the medieval period, a foreigner was any strangers who appear, say, in a given village. Someone who was not a part of that society or the culture. In Hindi, the term Pardesi might be used to describe such a person, and in the Persian, Ajnabi. A city dweller therefore might have regarded a forest dweller as a foreigner, but two peasants living in the same village were not foreigners to each other, even though they may have had different religious or the caste backgrounds. Yashas Institute, Leader IS, Suhas Sargar. Historian and their sources. Historians are used different types of sources to learn about the past depending upon the period of their study and the nature of their investigation. Last year, for example, you read about the rulers of the Gupta dynasty and the Harshavardhana. In this book, we will read about the following 1000 years from the roughly 700 to the 1750. We will notice some continuity in the sources used by the historians for the study of this period. They still rely on coins, inscription, architecture, and the textual records for information. But there is also considerable discontinuity. The number and variety of the textual records increased dramatically during this period. They slowly displaced the other types of available information. Through this period, the paper gradually became cheaper and more. The value of the paper in box. Compare the following. In the following middle of the 13th century, scholars wanted to copy a book, but he did not have enough paper, so he wasted a writing of the manuscript he did not want, dried the paper and used it. Second, a century later, if you bought some food in the market, you could be lucky and have the shopkeepers wrap it for you in some paper. When was the paper was more expensive and easily available, in the 13th or the 14th century? The widely available people use it to write the holy text, chronicles of the rulers, letters and teaching of the saint, petitions and judicial records, and for the registers of accounts and taxes. Manuscripts were collected by the wealthy people, rulers, monasteries and the temples. They were placed in the libraries and archives. These manuscripts and the documents provide a lot of detailed information to historians, but they are also difficult to use. There was no printing press in those days, so scribe copies manuscript by hand. If you have ever copied a friend's homeworks, you would know that this is not a simple exercise. Sometimes you cannot read your friend's handwriting and are forced to guess what is written. As a result, there are the small but the significant difference in the copy of your friend's work. Manuscript copying is somewhat similar. As scribes copied manuscript, they are also introduced small changes, a word here, a sentence there. There are small differences grew over centuries of copying until manuscripts of some text become substantial, different from one another. This is a serious problem because we rarely find an original manuscript of the author today. We are totally dependent upon the copies made by the later scribes. As a result, the historians have to read the different manuscript version of the same text to guess what the author had originally written. On occasions, authors revised their chronicles at different times. The 14th century chronicles, Ziauddin Barani wrote his chronicle first in 1356 and another version 2 years later. The two differ from each other, but the historian did not know about the existence of the first version until the 1960s. It remained lost in large library collection. Leader IS in association with Yashas Institute, Professor Suhas Sargar. New social and political group. The study of 1000 years between 700 and 1750 is a huge challenge to the historian, largely because of the scale and variety of development that occurred over the period at a different moment. In this period, the new technologies made their appearance, like Persian wheel in irrigations, the spinning wheel in a weaving, and the fireman in the combat. New foods and the beverages arrive in subcontinent: potatoes, corn, chilies, tea, and coffee. Remember that all these innovations, new technologies, and crops came along with the people who brought other ideas with them as well. As a result, this was a period of economic, political, social, cultural changes. You will learn about some of these changes in the chapter 5, 6 and 7. This was also a period of the great mobility. The group of the people traveled long distances in search of opportunity. The subcontinent held immense wealth and the possibility of people to carve a fortune. One group of the people who became important in this period were the Rajputas, a name derived from Rajputra. The son of a ruler between the 8th and 18th, 14th century, the term was applied more generally to group of the warriors who claimed Kshatriya caste status. The term included Leader IS in association with Yashas Institute, Professor Suhas Sargar. Not just rulers and the chieftains, but also the soldiers and commanders who served in the armies of different monarchs all over the subcontinent. The chivalric code of conduct, extreme valor, and the great sense of the loyalty were the qualities and attributes to the Rajput by their poets and bards. Other groups of the people, such as the Marathas, Sikhs, Jat, Ahoms, and Kayasthas, a caste of the scribes and secretaries, also used the opportunity of the age to become politically important. Throughout this period, there was a gradual clearing of the forest and extension of agriculture. The change faster and more complete in some areas than in others. Changes in their habitat forced many forest dwellers to migrate. Others started tilling the land and become the peasant. These new peasant groups gradually began to influence by regional markets, chieftains, priests, monasteries, and temples. They become part of a large complex societies and were required to pay taxes and offer goods and services to the local lords. As a result, the significant economic and social differences emerge amongst the peasants. Some possessed the more productive land, others also kept cattle, and some combined artisans work with agricultural activity during a lean season. As society became more differentiated, the people were grouped into jatis or the subcaste and rank on the basis of their backgrounds and their occupation. The ranks were not fixed permanently and varied according to the power, influence and resources controlled by the members of jatis. The status of the same jati could vary from area to the area. Jati frame on their rules and regulation to manage the conduct of their members. These regulations were enforced by the assembly of the elders, described in some areas as the Jati Panchayat, but the Jatis were also required to follow the rules of their villages. The several villages were governed by the chieftains. Together, they were only one small unit of state. Leader IS in association with Yashas Institute, Professor Suhas Sargar. Region and empire. Large states like those of the Cholas, chapter 2nd, Tughlaka in chapter 3rd, and the Mughals in chapter 4 encompass many regions. The Sanskrit Prashastis, see chapter 2nd for an example of a Prashastis praising the Delhi Sultanate, Ghyasuddin Balban in 1266 to 1287. Explain that he was the ruler of the vast empire that stretched from Bengal, Gauda in the east, to the Gajanna in Afghanistan in the west, included all of the South India, Dravida. The people of the different regions Gauda, Andhra, Kerala, Karnataka, Maharashtra, Gujarat apparently fled before his armies. Historian, see, these are the diagrams of the provinces of the Delhi Sultanate during the Muhammad Tughlaq. The region ran according to the Egyptian source Masalik al-Absar fi Mamalik al-Amsar of Shiabuddin Umari. regard these exaggerated claims of conquest at the same time. They are trying to understand why the rulers kept claiming to have control over the different part of the subcontinent. In box, why do you think the rulers made such claims? Languages and the regions. In 1318, the poet Amir Khusro noted that there was a different language in every region of this land: Sindhi, Lahori, Kashmiri, Dwaras Mudri in southern Karnataka, Telangani in Andhra Pradesh, Gujarati in Gujarat, Mabari in Tamil Nadu, Gauri in Bengal, Awadhi in eastern Uttar Pradesh, and Hindavi in the area around the Delhi. Amir Khusro went on to explain that the contrast to these languages, there was a Sanskrit which did not belong to any region. It was an old language and the common people do not know it, only the Brahmanas do. Make a list of the languages mentioned by the Amir Khusro. They prepare another list of the names of the languages spoken today in the regions he mentioned. Underline the names that are similar to the circle and those that are different. Did you notice that the names by which the languages are known have changed over time? By 700, many regions already possess the distinct geographical dimensions and their own language and cultural characteristics. You will learn more about these in chapter 9. They were also associated with the specific ruling dynasties. There was a considerable conflict between these states. Occasionally, the dynastic like the Cholas, Khaljis, Tughlakas, Mughals were able to build an empire that was a pan-regional, spanning diverse regions. Not all these empires were equally stable or successful. Compare, for example, table 1 in the chapter 3 and 4. What was the duration of rule of the Khalji and the Mughal dynasties? Find out whether and for how long your state was a part of these pan-regional empires. Leader IS in association with Yashas Institute, Suhas Sargar. When the Mughal Empire declined in the 18th century, it led to the re-emergence of the regional state, chapter 10. But years of imperial, pan-regional rule had altered the characteristics of the regions. Across most of the subcontinent, the regions were left with the legacies of the big and small state that had ruled over them. This was apparent in the emergence of the many distinct and the shared traditions. In the realm of the governance, the management of the economy, elite cultures, and the language. Through the 1,000 years between 700 and 1750, the characteristics of the different regions did not grow in isolation. These regions felt the impact of larger pan-regional forces of integration without ever quite losing their distinctiveness. Old and new religions. The 1,000 years of history that we are exploring witnessed a major development in the religious traditions. The people's belief in the divine was sometimes deeply personal, but more usually it was collective. Collective belief in the supernatural agency, religion was often closely connected with the social and economical organization of local communities. As the social worlds of these groups altered is to that their belief. It was during this period that the important changes occurred in what we call Hinduism today. These included the worship of the new deities, the construction of temples by royalties, and the growing importance of Brahmanas, the priests and the dominant groups in society. The knowledge of Sanskrit text earned the Brahmanas a lot of respect in society. The dominant position was consolidated by the support of their patrons, new rulers searching for prestige. One of the major developments of this period was the emergence of idea of the bhakti, of a loving personal deity that devotees could reach without the aid of priests or elaborate the rituals. You will be learning about this and the other traditions in chapter 8. Leader IS in association with Yashas Institute, Professor Suhas Sargar's Navi Mumbai. This was also the period when the new religion appeared in the subcontinent. The merchants and migrants first brought the teaching of the Holy Quran to the India in the 7th century. Muslims regard the Quran as their holy book and accept the sovereignty of the one God, Allah, whose love, mercy, and the bounty embrace all those who believe in Him, without regard to the social background. Many rulers were patrons of Islam and the ulama learning theological logicians and jurists. And like Hinduism, Islam was interpreted in a variety of ways by its followers. There were the Shia Muslim who believe in the Prophet Muhammad's son-in-law. Ali was the legitimate leader of the Muslim community, and the Sunni Muslim who accepted the authority of early leaders, Khalifas of the community, and succeeded the Khalifas. There were other important differences between the various schools of laws, Hanafi and the Shafis, mainly in India, and in theology and mystic tradition. Thinking about time and historical period. Historians do not see the time just as passing of the hours, days, or years. As a clock or a calendar, the time also reflects the changes in the social and economical organizations, in the persistence and the transformation of ideas and the belief. The study of time is made somewhat easier by dividing the past into large segments, periods that possess the shared characteristics. In the middle of the 19th century, the British historian divided the history of India into three periods: Hindu, Muslim, and British. This division was based on the idea that the religion of the rulers was the only important historical change and that there were no other significant development in the economy, society, or the culture. Such a division also ignored the rich diversity of the subcontinent. Leader IS in association with Yashas Institute, Navi Mumbai, Professor Suhas Sargar. Few historians follow these periodizations today. Most look to economic and social factors to characterize the major elements of the different moments of the past. The histories you read last year included a wide range of the early societies: hunter-gatherers, early farmers, people living in towns and villages, and early empires and kingdoms. The historians you will be studying this year are often described as a medievals. You will find out more about the spread of peasant societies, the rise of the regional and imperial state formations, sometimes at the cost of the pastoral and the forest people, the development of Hinduism and Islam as a major religion, and the arrival of the European trading companies. These 1,000 years of independent Indian history witnessed the considerable changes. After all, the 16th and 18th centuries were quite different from the 8th and 11th centuries. Therefore, describing the entire period as a one historical unit is not without its problem. Moreover, the medieval period is often contrasted with the modern period. Modernity carries with a sense of material progress and intellectual advancement. This seems to suggest that the medieval period was lacking in any change whatsoever. But of course, we know this was not the case. During these 1,000 years of society of the subcontinent were transformed often, and economies in several regions reach a level of prosperity that attract the interest of European trading companies. As you read this book, look out the signs of change and the historical process at work. Also, whenever you can compare what you read in this book with what you read in the last. Look out the changes and continuities where you can, and look at the worlds around you to see what else has changed or remained the same. Imagine you are a historian, chooses one of the themes mentioned in this chapter, such as economic, social, and political history, and discuss why you think it would be interesting to find out the history of that themes. That's all about this chapter. Thanks for listening. We are from Leader IS in association with Yashas Institute. Myself, Professor Suhas Sargar. Thanks for listening.